Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules
Hello,
here for
WhatCulture.com.
And you know what, when you think of a hero most likely to have countless shady plans to defeat every other hero around,
It's not shady, it's called being prepared. Don't disparage my goat like that.
it's likely that the first and possibly only face that pops into your mind is going to be Batman. Few heroes have been shown on the printed page beating up or otherwise planning to beat up their allies and friends as much as the Dark Knight.
It's called being
and
realistic
we've seen many
and
times
smart
over the course of history that
prepared.
our boy Bruce has a plan to kill, maim, or generally defeat every single person that he's ever encountered in his life. Yeah, he might have a few trust issues. So what we're going to do today is actually take a look at these plans and figure out how he would actually take down all of his super friends
Superman,
if they turned into super
the most
pains in
famous
his
one.
arse. So let's take a look. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and this is how Batman would defeat each member of the Justice League. Number 10, Cyborg. While Cyborg is often on the outskirts of the
I'm gonna guess. Cyborg, he's gonna he's gonna take down Cyborg by messing with his machinery. Sending his technology haywire and putting a virus into his technology. That's how he did it.
Justice League, it's worth mentioning him here at the offset for one particular Dark Knight plan involving him that highlights just how far Bats is willing to go to make sure that he can defeat those with powers that could obliterate
But also
his...
you need to make... There is a differential on when he say defeat. He doesn't want to kill them, he wants to incapacitate them. Incapacitate? That's how... Incapacitate. He just wants to make them... like, stun them, essentially, that's the word, until he can bring them back to the good side. He doesn't want to kill anyone.
Human form. In Injustice, we see that Bruce has implanted Cyborg with a virus that turns out to come in plenty handy when Batman comes to stop him and the other members of the Justice League taking Gotham's supervillains to Superman's new max security facility. However, this virus becomes a much more worrying thing when Victor checks the date it was installed within him and realizes that Batman had placed the dominant threat inside him literally the first week they met. Which means that there's a very real possibility that our universe's Bats has either done this also, or has similar plans to take his shiny metal pal down should the need arise. Number 9, Green Arrow. Perhaps it's not totally fair to say that Green Arrow is a bit of a pushover when compared with the rest of the Justice League. After all, he does take countless supervillain crooks down on his own, and he's pretty much a prime example of peak human condition. However, when you stand next to a dude who shoots laser beams out of his eyes, it's hard to measure up.
And I'm sorry, my Green Arrow is freaking Stephen Amell, and he won't kick anyone's ass or find a way to do it. Gosh. The Green Arrow, I just love the Green Arrow so much. Oh, it's like Green Arrow and Batman, essentially. Batman just has much more legacy on his side, and much more smarter in the detective way, I think. Yeah, that would be a fair assessment.
Would explain one of the most inadvertently hilarious things that Batman has ever done. In DC, after Bruce has passed away after being attacked by some of his zombified former protégés, Damian recovers a memory file that contains some of his plans for taking down various threats, and Green Arrow is not on it. That's right, Batman didn't even make a specific plan to take Green Arrow down, presumably because he figured he could just go and beat him up the old school way if anything went wrong with him. Number 8, Plastic Man. Given how silly and cartoonish the ability to be a human piece of elastic looks, it's easy to write Plastic Man off as a bit of a joke character. Someone to bring a little more light-hearted banter to the table and not do much else aside from that. However, the fact that Plastic Man can take more or less any form via his plastic morphing means that he's a much more powerful threat than you might initially expect, which is evidenced in Dark Knight Metal, where he turns into a goddamn plastic war machine and absolutely kicks ass. It's clear that Batman considers Eel O'Brien a legit threat because when he does go for him, he does so with some seriously hardcore plans. Because Tower of Babel sees Bruce's plan against Plastic Man, and it is to coat him in liquid nitrogen and shatter him into a million teeny tiny pieces.
Oh, that is
hilariously,
so
this
smart.
is again
You freeze him to below temperature. That's where you freeze the molecules, and it can't bend and shape into any other form. That is so clever.
merciful scheme, because the Batman who laughs, well, he takes it one step further, stretching him until he reached his breaking point, which is a fate that we could never experience, but imagining it alone feels pretty awful.
I don't want to imagine.
Number 7, Martian Manhunter. Although Martian Manhunter is
no
usually resigned to the sidelines for a weird amount of Justice League storylines, he's really the dark horse of the group. Not only is he capable of shape-shifting into dangerous forms, but his abilities are borderline boundless. He can turn invisible, regenerates at incredible speeds, and can use telepathy and telekinesis, and is resistant to most earthly poisons and diseases. In short, he's a bit of a secret powerhouse. But not to Batman, it seems, who had a pretty brutal plan for his green friend should he ever turn from heroism. Naturally, Martian Manhunter inherited his kind's weakness for fire, and thus Batman's plan involved nanites that would cause the poor alien's skin to permanently be set on fire. Not killing him, but obviously distracting him from anything but the agonizing pain of being on fire. This is only slightly less evil than the plan the Batman Who Laughs uses on his version of the hero, as we see him half exploded up on a wall, suggesting that Bats either used a substance that dissolved the Martian's structure into more of a liquid, or sabotaged his shape-shifting ability somehow to the point where it straight up killed the poor guy.
What I would give, the money, the life essence I would give to see the Batman Who Laughs storyline being brought into live action, I would give my kidney to see that into live action with a good cast and a great build-up. Oh my goodness, there's so many storylines that we have missed because Warner Brothers don't know how to keep freaking DC organized properly because they're idiots over there. The only company I'll freaking one of the only companies I'll freaking actually complain and say negative things about, because gosh, they have such great IP, but they are just idiots.
Maybe permanently being set on fire isn't so bad by comparison. Number 6, Green Lantern. With the powers of the Green Lantern so intrinsically linked to space politics, taking one of them out poses a unique issue. How to deal with them in a way that doesn't involve sabotaging the power source of any lanterns that haven't gone rogue. Interestingly, this appears to lead to a series of solutions that are much crueler than you might expect. Between blinding Green Lantern so that he can't make constructs with his powers, and stealing the ring's powers away with a Sinestro core ring, the schemes the Dark Knight has to neutralize one of his supposed allies are much more evil than many plans actual comic villains have made over the years. Number 5, Flash. While Flash is by no means the best fighter of the League, it's actually fair to say that he generally doesn't need to be, as when you're able to be fast enough to...
What do you mean best fighter? I think Flash is probably the top 3 most OP people they have on the DC side, especially depending the power level of the Flash we're talking about, the power level of the Speedster. Because the Flash is... okay, he's not Superman, but gosh, he could give Superman a run for his money if he wanted to.
To avoid any and all hits thrown your way, you could be as weak as a bowl of cereal left in milk overnight and still be able to win your fair share of fights. As such, he's a bit of a tricky one to try and plan to take down. But something being tricky has never stopped the Dark Knight before, and it sure as hell won't when it comes to taking down a potential threat. As such, the Bat crafted 1 or 2 tricks to place up his sleeve just in case he ever fell on the wrong side of any of the various speedsters who have held the mantle of the Flash. The most notable of these is, of course, that of the vibrating bullet from Tower of Babel, which, despite its silly name, would stick in the Flash's body due to the vibration's frequency and result in the poor hero having seizures. Oh, and he also has a lightning rod from the future that allows him to slow the Flash down too, so why exactly he also had the bullet is anyone's guess. Number 4,
how did he get the freaking rod?
Well, Aquaman in...
I remember that from an episode in the Flash series, when Barry Allen couldn't control his vibrations and he continuously was phasing throughout. That's a smart way to freaking disrupt his molecule. That's a smart way to stop the Flash. But doesn't also freezing work on the Flash? Freezing? And then there's the troll thing, which I have no idea.
Most media is lauded as a bit of a dorky pushover. It is worth noting that, as funny as those jokes can be, he is still a legitimate
threat. I don't understand why Aquaman is a comedic character in the media.
Power over the oceans and an ability to get all of those creepy sea creatures from the depth to attach themselves to your terrified face. Unfortunately for Aquaman, though, what he also does happen to be is just a guy with some very exploitable weaknesses, most crucially dehydration, which Batman has either planned to exploit or actively exploited throughout the years.
That's so
In
true.
Tower of Babel, it's revealed that the Bats has developed an unusual strain of Scarecrow's fear toxin the Batman had tampered with so that when Aquaman was exposed to it, it would make him afraid of water.
Oh my God,
which
that's
obviously would create a
genius.
pretty big problem for the lad. After being shamed for having created such a
genius.
terrible thing to defeat his supposed friend, Batman would then go on to reveal some years later that he has a custom Justice Buster, which also came with magnesium carbonate. And what does this do? Well, it sucks all the moisture out of whatever
That's
it's shot at,
so
like perhaps,
smart.
I don't know, Aquaman, which you'll note is exactly the same thing, but apparently is way more moral. Number 3, Wonder Woman. Unlike with Superman, a nice apple pie and a friendly smile might not be enough to soften Wonder Woman. She needs a mountain of blood and slain enemies, and those are slightly harder to come by. Hilariously, this desire for battle is exactly what Batman would use against her in the now infamous Tower of Babel storyline, which saw him dispose of her by trapping her in a simulation where she was locked in constant combat, thus making her too preoccupied to notice that she was basically stuck inside a big violent version of The Sims. This isn't the only route that Bats would likely take in order to fell his former comrade, however, as Justice League Doom saw him choose to poison Wonder Woman, which suggests a good old-fashioned dose of deadly substances would also be a way to fell her. Number 2,
amazing.
Superman. As may come as a surprise to a resounding, well, nobody, Superman is one of the biggest potential threats to the DC universe were he to ever go rogue, which is kind of the trade-off for him usually being one of its most powerful defenders. That said, Supes is pretty good about being prepared for a situation like this, given that the guy pretty much knows that Batman definitely has something made of kryptonite in that very trusty utility belt of his at any given moment. Not that this is the only method the Dark Knight has cooked up in order to destroy his technically best friend, as several comics have seen Batman utilize the power of a red sun to weaken the Man of Steel until they're finally on an equal footing. Failing all of this, there's a good chance that one of the reasons that Bats is so darn chummy with the spaceman is so that he can appeal to his good nature in order to try and snap him out of any of his evil ways. In fact, you'd hope that this would be his first choice of action, instead of breaking out the kryptonite gun straight away. Calm it down, mate. And number 1, Batman. You didn't see this one coming, did you? Well, unless you have Batman-like prediction abilities, of course, in which case, well played, my friend. Perhaps the member of the Justice League that Batman is most concerned about having plans to defeat is, as strange as it might sound, himself. After all, for any other members of the League, he can be there.
Freaking facts. It's the Batman who loves proves it. Why freaking Batman is the GOAT. But evil Batman, a psychotic with his genius fighting capability and his freaking ingenuity, he could take down anyone. He is the best of all of DC.
To make sure that they get stopped in their tracks one way or another. But if he's brainwashed or goes rogue, there's not really an equivalent of him to do the same. This is arguably one of the many reasons that he formed the Justice League, and crucially is likely also a reason that he has so many sidekicks that he trains and then keeps them at arm's length, despite it being clear that he considers them as his own children. As much as Batman makes teams and alliances to take down incoming threats, there's no doubt that he recognizes that he could somehow become one of them, and so he's trusting them to incapacitate or kill him just as much as he trusts them to take down whatever other big bad comes their team's way. In short, it's likely Batman doesn't actually have trust issues, he's just
he has plans to take out all his enemies, but his number one plan is, here's how you take me out. So you can't say I'm hypocritical, you can't say I'm biased. I have a plan for you to take me out.
Very aware that his closest allies and friends are also the people who he will need to take him down if the time ever calls for it. And how that'll be done? I don't know, just make the bat pole really greasy and then he'll just fall down there by an accident, or just push him down some stairs. Maybe get Alfred to poison his toast. I don't know. And there we go, my